Have you ever felt like the world around you is stuck? Not paused, not broken, just stuck. Like we're living in a society where everyone looks like an adult, but acts, thinks, and feels like they never really left childhood behind. What if, and stay with me here, society has raised a generation that doesn't want to grow up, not because it can't, but because it doesn't see the point? Look around. Our lives are filled with toys. They just got more expensive. We collect gadgets instead of action figures, scroll through screens instead of playgrounds, and chase dopamine hits instead of dreams. Adults come home from work and escape into video games for hours. We binge watch entire seasons of nostalgic shows that remind us of simpler times. Our humor, our memes, our entertainment, they're all built on irony and regression, not growth. It's as if we're afraid of seriousness, afraid of responsibility, afraid of being seen as too mature. Because somewhere along the way, adulthood stopped being an achievement and started being an insult. Think about it. In the past, growing up meant something. You left home, started a career, built a family, faced challenges. Today, those milestones are delayed or dismissed entirely. The modern adult often feels lost between two worlds. Too old to be carefree, too young to feel fulfilled. We've stretched adolescence into a lifestyle, one that celebrates comfort, novelty, and entertainment above all else. But here's the question that haunts this era. It's not hard to understand why. Growing up used to mean stability, purpose, wisdom. Now it often means burnout, debt, and endless pressure. So we escape into fantasy worlds, nostalgia, and distraction. And who can blame us? Reality feels heavy. Childhood feels safe. But the problem is, when everyone chooses comfort over challenge, we stop evolving individually and collectively. A society that refuses to grow up doesn't just stall, it regresses. We trade wisdom for pleasure, depth for convenience, freedom for comfort. Yet, beneath all this comfort, something inside us stirs. A quiet hunger for meaning, for growth, for real maturity. We scroll endlessly but feel disconnected. We chase novelty but feel numb. We laugh at everything but believe in nothing. There's a growing number of people who sense this shift. People who feel intellectually restless, as if they've woken up in a world that celebrates childishness but punishes depth. They're asking questions like, why does responsibility feel outdated? Why is wisdom mocked? Why does seriousness make people uncomfortable? These are not cynical questions, they're human ones. They come from a place of longing, a desire to remember what adulthood was supposed to mean. So maybe the real question isn't, why don't people grow up anymore? Maybe it's, what kind of world did we build that makes growing up feel pointless? Because infantilization isn't just a personal failure. It's a social design. It's cultural, economic, and psychological. We've built systems that reward consumption, not growth. Comfort, not courage. Pleasure, not purpose. And the result? A generation that never fully steps into its own power. In this video, we're not here to shame or moralize. We're here to understand, to explore how history, technology, and psychology all converge to create a world where maturity feels like a rebellion. Because maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't that people refuse to grow up. Maybe it's that no one ever showed them why they should. In the chapters ahead, we'll look at how adulthood quietly disappeared, how the digital age turned life into a playground, and how we can reclaim the lost art of growing up, not as a burden, but as a profound act of freedom. Adulthood was once an achievement. Now it's something people apologize for. There was a time when becoming an adult meant something. It wasn't just about age, it was about becoming. You reached adulthood by proving yourself, through discipline, resilience, and contribution. Adulthood was a badge of honor. It meant independence, responsibility, and wisdom. It was the stage of life where you built, created, mentored, and led. But today, adulthood feels optional. It's no longer something people strive toward. It's something they delay, avoid, or even mock. We live in a world where people joke about adulting as if it's a foreign language. Doing taxes, cooking meals, or maintaining relationships isn't viewed as maturity. It's treated like a burden. And beneath the humor, there's a quiet truth. Many adults don't feel ready to be adults at all. This is the death of the grown-up, not in the literal sense, but in the cultural one. The idea of the adult, the wise, grounded, dependable figure, has faded. Instead, the modern adult is expected to stay young, youthful in spirit, carefree in thought, and endlessly flexible in identity. We chase novelty instead of wisdom. We prize self-expression over self-discipline. It's not that people have become weaker or lazier. It's that the social scaffolding that once guided people toward adulthood has quietly eroded. Where once adulthood was a journey toward mastery, now it's a detour from comfort. Where once we admired depth, now we reward surface. We are, in many ways, a society of adults trained to remain adolescents, independent in age, dependent in behavior. So what does this actually look like? What does perpetual childhood feel like when it becomes the norm, not the exception? Why are so many adults obsessed with being young at heart, even when it costs them self-respect? What does it mean when your average 30-year-old has less responsibility than a 16-year-old did 50 years ago? You can see the symptoms everywhere. They're subtle at first, even endearing, until you realize how deep they run. Many adults today still rely heavily on their parents, emotionally or financially. Failure to launch has become a sociological term, not just a joke. We delay marriage, delay commitment, delay responsibility, not always because we can't afford it, but because we've been taught that freedom means avoiding permanence. Our culture praises those who keep their options open, but an open door is meaningless if you never walk through it. Emotionally, we've grown fragile. Disagreement feels like attack. Criticism feels like trauma. We seek comfort over truth, validation over growth. We retreat into curated bubbles, digital or ideological, that protect us from discomfort. Conflict isn't seen as a path to understanding, but as something to be avoided entirely. We've also become nostalgia consumers. The entertainment industry thrives on repackaging our childhoods, endless remakes, reboots, and retro revivals. We don't just enjoy the past, we live in it. There's nothing wrong with nostalgia. It's human to remember fondly. But when nostalgia replaces aspiration, it becomes regression. When your primary emotional refuge is the past, it's often because the present feels too uncertain, and the future too intimidating. At the heart of it all is avoidance. Avoidance of discomfort, responsibility, consequence, and commitment. The very experiences that forge adulthood. Growth demands friction, and friction feels foreign in a culture that worships ease. So what happens when this avoidance becomes normalized? When we stop engaging critically with life, ideas, and truth itself? Have you ever noticed how we confuse opinions with truth and emotions with facts? What if we've traded reflection for reaction? Infantilization doesn't only affect how we act, it shapes how we think. In an age of constant stimulation, we've lost our appetite for complexity. Critical thinking, once a hallmark of adulthood, has been replaced by reaction. Scroll, swipe, like, share. Each gesture rewarding instant validation. Each moment reinforcing a simple message. You don't have to think, we'll do it for you. Critical thinking is slow. It requires patience, context, and humility, all qualities that don't fit neatly into modern life. We're taught to have opinions, not understanding, to express, not to reflect. We've built digital environments where outrage feels productive and silence feels irrelevant. Algorithms don't reward truth, they reward emotion. The louder your feelings, the more visible you become. And when emotion becomes currency, reason loses its value. As adults, we should be capable of nuance, of holding conflicting ideas, questioning assumptions, and adapting our beliefs. But infantilization strips that ability away. It rewards impulsivity, not insight. We've become emotional children in intellectual playgrounds, arguing over toys instead of ideas, performing outrage instead of pursuing understanding. Critical thinking isn't just an academic skill, it's emotional maturity in action. It's the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, to delay judgment until reflection catches up. And that's the essence of adulthood, the strength to pause before reacting. But if we're losing that strength, maybe it's because we're not rewarded for having it. What if our entire economy depends on us staying childish consumers? Let's be honest. There are powerful systems that benefit from keeping us immature. Consumer culture thrives on insecurity. It needs you to feel incomplete to buy the next product, trend, or experience that promises fulfillment. Social media thrives on comparison, keeping you emotionally volatile, constantly measuring your worth against others. Politics thrives on outrage, feeding you simple villains and easy answers. Even entertainment trains us to crave constant stimulation, to expect emotional payoff without emotional effort. In many ways, society doesn't just tolerate infantilization, it requires it. Because mature people who think deeply, act responsibly, and delay gratification, are harder to manipulate. They're less reactive, more resilient, and more discerning. And that's a problem for a system built on attention and consumption. Every advertisement whispers, "You deserve it. You're special. You should never be uncomfortable." But those are not messages of empowerment. They're lullabies, designed to keep us quiet, dependent, and docile. We've been trained to see growth as optional, effort as unfair, and struggle as trauma. The irony? A society obsessed with freedom has accidentally imprisoned itself in comfort. So maybe it's not surprising that adulthood is disappearing. When every system rewards dependence, distraction, and impulsivity, stagnation becomes the path of least resistance. But this didn't happen overnight. The disappearance of adulthood isn't just a symptom of modern times. It's the result of a long, slow transformation in how society defines meaning, progress, and happiness. If we want to understand how adulthood lost its value, we need to go back to the origins of this cultural shift, back to the moment when youth stopped being a stage of life and became a permanent identity. Theme: exploring the historical and cultural origins of why adulthood lost its meaning. We used to worship wisdom. Now we worship youth. Once upon a time, society's greatest aspiration was not to be young, but to be wise, to think clearly, to reason deeply, to live justly. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the Age of Enlightenment was built on one central belief: that human beings could rise above ignorance through reason. Philosophers like Kant, Voltaire, and Rousseau believed adulthood was the culmination of human potential, the moment when the mind took full responsibility for its thoughts and actions. To be an adult was to be awake, to think for oneself, to act according to reason, to question authority, to seek truth through evidence. That was the Enlightenment's promise. Maturity was freedom, not from hardship, but from ignorance. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The pursuit of wisdom gave way to the pursuit of pleasure. The discipline of reason was replaced by the dopamine of distraction. We no longer celebrate philosophers, we celebrate influencers. We no longer admire patience, we admire virality. And in this shift, we traded depth for immediacy. The Enlightenment gave us the idea of the rational adult. The modern world replaced it with the endlessly entertained child. When truth becomes secondary to stimulation, and thinking becomes optional, the foundation of adulthood begins to crack. Because maturity is not just an age, it's a habit of mind. And when a society stops practicing that habit, it stops producing grown-ups. So how did this happen? How did we go from a civilization that prized wisdom to one that glorifies endless youth? The answer begins not in the classroom or the smartphone, but in the marketplace. When did youth stop being a stage of life and become a permanent identity? The 1950s didn't just sell products, they sold adolescence as a dream. The 20th century did something extraordinary. It didn't just invent consumerism, it invented youth as an ideal. After World War II, Western societies experienced an economic boom. For the first time, teenagers had disposable income. Advertisers noticed and seized the opportunity. Before this era, youth was simply a transition, a short bridge between childhood and adulthood. But marketing changed everything. It told young people they weren't just between stages. They were a culture, a force, a brand. Rebellion was suddenly marketable. Freedom was fashionable. And with it came a new message. Don't grow up, it's boring. From Elvis Presley to Coca-Cola, from James Dean to Disney, the world began selling adolescence as the most desirable phase of life. Movies, music, and fashion celebrated rebellion, not refinement. Excitement, not endurance. The result? For the first time in history, adults started trying to be like the young. Being youthful became synonymous with being relevant, while being mature began to sound like decay. Of course, this wasn't accidental. A society built on consumption thrives on restlessness. If adulthood once meant contentment, then contentment had to go. So the market created a loop. Keep people chasing youth. Keep them insecure about aging. And they'll keep buying. Fashion, entertainment, and even technology evolved to feed this cycle. Every year promised something new, while anything stable or old was seen as disposable. The tragedy is subtle but profound. We stopped seeing aging as growth and started seeing it as failure. We turned maturity into something to hide. The youth ideal became a mirror we couldn't look away from. And in doing so, we forgot that wisdom, not youth, was meant to be life's greatest reward. But the roots of infantilization aren't just in marketing or entertainment. They reach deeper, into the very systems designed to teach us how to think. We're taught how to pass tests, not how to live. Once upon a time, education was about shaping character. The goal wasn't just to produce workers, it was to produce thinkers. In ancient Greece, philosophy, logic, and rhetoric were the foundations of learning. They taught not just what to think, but how to think. They believed that a good mind was the cornerstone of a good society. But modern education tells a different story. Today, schools and universities have become training grounds, not for citizens, but for employees. We measure intelligence by test scores, not depth of understanding. We reward memorization, not reflection. We teach facts, but not meaning. From an early age, children learn to compete, not contemplate, to perform, not to question, to specialize, not to synthesize. By the time they reach adulthood, many have mastered the art of achievement, but never learned the art of wisdom. And wisdom, the slow, messy, uncomfortable process of understanding life, has been replaced by the efficiency of knowing just enough to keep going. This is the silent collapse of intellectual maturity. We raise students who can build machines that think, but struggle to understand their own thoughts. We teach them to optimize life, but not to live it. As philosopher Alan Bloom once said, the most important function of the university is to protect the young from themselves. But modern institutions often do the opposite. They protect young people from discomfort, challenge, and contradiction. The result? Adults who are academically trained but existentially lost. We've raised minds that are informed but not wise, and a society that is smart but shallow. But maybe it isn't just education that changed us. Maybe it's the entire way we live. Because something else happened in the modern era. Something that transformed our relationship with struggle itself. When life gets too easy, do we stop growing? Human history was once defined by hardship. Survival required effort, adaptation, and endurance. Comfort was a luxury, not a lifestyle. But the industrial and technological revolutions changed that. Machines began to do our work. Stores began to deliver our food. Screens began to deliver our pleasure. We no longer had to struggle to live. And so, slowly, we forgot how to live with struggle. Comfort became the new god. We designed homes, cities, and technologies around convenience. We built systems to eliminate friction, the very thing that once forced us to grow. We celebrate ease as progress, But comfort has a cost. It removes the need to adapt. A child avoids struggle because they expect protection. An adult embraces struggle because they expect growth. But in a world that shields us from every inconvenience, who has a reason to mature? We complain when our Wi-Fi is slow, when our packages take a day too long, when reality dares to be less smooth than the digital world. We are surrounded by tools that do everything for us, and yet we feel weaker than ever. The irony is painful. We build a world to make life easier, and in doing so, made ourselves less equipped to live it. When comfort becomes our highest value, adulthood, with all its weight, patience, and resilience, becomes obsolete. Because growing up requires discomfort. It requires facing fear, making choices, taking responsibility, and risking failure. And if we remove all friction from life, we remove the very conditions that make adulthood necessary. But here's the twist. This obsession with comfort didn't stop with industry or convenience. It evolved. It digitized. It became invisible and unstoppable. Because the next chapter of infantilization isn't just physical comfort. It's mental comfort. A world designed not just to serve your needs, but to predict, curate, and shape them. A world where friction isn't eliminated by machines, but by algorithms. And that's where we're headed next. Into the digital playground. A realm where every emotion, every opinion, every desire is captured, monetized, and mirrored back to us. Where adulthood isn't just delayed, it's designed out of existence. What if your social feed is your new parent, feeding you dopamine every time you cry for attention? In the past, when a child cried, a parent offered comfort, food, warmth, or attention. Today, when an adult feels bored, anxious, or lonely, they reach for something else. Not a person, not a purpose, but a screen. Each scroll, each notification, each like is a tiny act of soothing, a digital pacifier for emotional discomfort. But unlike a parent, your screen doesn't care about your growth. It only cares about your engagement. Social media doesn't just know what you like, it shapes what you like. It learns your rhythms, your moods, your insecurities. It gives you just enough validation to keep you coming back. You post, you wait, you check. Did anyone notice me? Did anyone agree? Did anyone care? Every notification is a reward. Every like is a pat on the head. And in this endless cycle of craving and reward, we've turned adulthood into a performance. What once defined maturity, self-control, delayed gratification, reflection, is now replaced by the constant need for feedback. We're not thinking, we're reacting. We're not connecting, we're performing. And the cruel genius of the algorithm is that it rewards the most childish parts of us. The impulsive, emotional, tribal, and insecure. It keeps us hooked by feeding outrage, not understanding. Desire, not discipline. Reaction, not reason. So we scroll. Not because we're fulfilled, but because we're restless. Because deep down, the attention we crave online feels easier to get than the fulfillment we lack offline. The algorithm doesn't raise adults, it raises dependence. It gives comfort without growth, stimulation without substance. And in doing so, it transforms the digital world into a giant nursery. One where the toys never run out, and the lights never turn off. But it's not just social media. The same psychological architecture, rewards, levels, achievements, has crept into almost every part of life. And without even realizing it, we've turned our existence into one big game.